Good morning. It is Sunday. Thank God it's Easter Sunday, April the 17th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner and the Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, we will have no free lunch, Chapter 3 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting, and Part 1 of Chapter 3, and Chapter 16 of the book, Tales from My Bicentennial Year, called Turkey Bowl. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 17th. Bind the powers of darkness that control the airwaves. My child, it is my desire that you will do what is right in my sight, and that you will walk in the ways of righteousness. Seek my face, and like my servant Josiah, purge your life and your home of the powers of darkness that arise as altars of wickedness in this present generation. Break down the wickedness of the media, which has corrupted the eyes of this present generation. Take authority over the powers of the enemy that are permeating the airwaves and releasing filth and violence upon this land. Seek my righteousness and fill the eyes and the ears of this generation with the wonders and miracles of my great love and power. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, Leviticus chapter 26, verse 30. Prayer declaration. Lord, I take authority over the princes of media in the name of Jesus. Let the high places of witchcraft be destroyed, and let the eyes and ears of this present generation be turned to your righteousness. Make me a beacon of light in this evil world, and raise up a standard of righteousness in this land. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 17th. And I do these prayers because I'm the only true conservative in the United States, and apparently the only true conservative that has the courage to display his faith. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, a constitutional amendment banning abortion throughout the country. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liability to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. Number nine, a flexible minimum wage. Number 10, means-tested health care. And number 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Number one, bring back not-for-profit news. Number two, defeat the cult of promiscuity with the promotion of privacy. Number three, defeat the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number four, defeat the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number five, defeat the cult of imagination, psychology, and Hollywood with religion and research. Number six, defeat the cult of reinvention by admitting one's mistakes. Number seven, defeat the cult of death, abortion, infanticide, and assisted suicide. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number 1, they are neutral. Number 2, they fail to correct their mistakes. 3, they demoralize their audiences. Number 4, they contradict themselves. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Left-wing, right-wing vocabulary. The left says, going forward. The right says, from now on. The left says, homeless. The right says, squatter. The left says, migrant. The right says, fugitive. The left says, eliminate. The right says, reduce. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, everyone wants to live at the expense of the state. They forget that the state lives at the expense of everyone. Unquote. Frederick Bastiat. Our conversations about government spending would be so dramatically different if we first realized that the government has no money to spend that it does not first take from someone else, whether it be confiscation, taxation, or debt, future confiscation. Government spending legitimate to the extent that it funds the necessities of government is always, tautologically, an extraction of wealth from the private sector. All but the anarchists know there is some legitimate necessity for government funding. Once we start with the basic premise I describe herein, that such spending is essentially a conversation about how much money we want to extract from private citizens, then we can have a more honest and hopefully useful conversation. And that was, there's no free lunch. Thank you, thank you. And now, the collapse of parenting, Chapter 3, why are so many kids on medication? Trent is 8 years old. In my office, he is happy. He giggles when I wag my Daffy Duck puppet over my head and use my Daffy Duck voice. But his parents tell me that if Trent doesn't get his way or if some little unexpected thing goes wrong, he erupts in a temper tantrum. He just goes totally berserk, his mom says. He screams, he cries, he throws things. But then 5 minutes later, he's laughing again. Before I can say anything, Mom continues. I went online and researched it, and I'm thinking maybe he's bipolar, rapid cycling. I nod sagely. After a thorough evaluation, it's clear that Trent doesn't have any form of bipolar disorder, rapid cycling, or otherwise. He has mood swings. He gets mad when he doesn't get his way. That's within the range of a normal for an 8-year-old. But his parents seem helpless to guide his behavior or to respond appropriately to his outbursts. I begin to wonder, how do I break the news to this mom that there is no role for medication here? The problem lies not in Trent at all, but in his parents' failure to set and enforce consistent limits and consequences. As I mentioned in Chapter 1, a big part of the task of inculturation is teaching Fulgham's rules. Play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. In the 3 decades between 1955 and 1985, parents could rely on the kindergarten classroom to teach these rules. In that area, even those parents who didn't work terribly hard at parenting could usually take for granted that kids knew and accepted these rules. But not anymore. In many American kindergartens today, as I said in Chapter 1, the first priority is more likely to be teaching diphthongs rather than teaching respect, courtesy, and manners. Parents today must explicitly teach Fulgham's rules and everything that goes with them. But many parents don't do that, for at least 2 reasons. First, they may not realize they need to. Their own parents may not have preached to them on these topics 20 or 30 years ago, so why would they have to teach this stuff to their own kids? Second, parents today are less comfortable asserting authority than parents in previous generations. Now, I now regularly encounter parents like Trent's mom, parents who wonder whether their young child might have rapid cycling bipolar disorder or some other neuropsychiatric explanation for bad behavior. I explain to those parents that it's normal for an 8-year-old to swing through different moods in half an hour, sometimes in just 5 minutes. That's not rapid cycling bipolar disorder, that's being 8 years old. I say it over and over again. The job of the parent is to teach self-control, to explain what is and is not acceptable, to establish boundaries and enforce consequences. Back in a minute. Thank you. 2 decades ago, that was common sense. Not anymore, at least not in the United States. As recently as 1994, it was rare for an individual under age 20 to be diagnosed as bipolar. But by 2003 in the United States, it was becoming common. There was a 40-fold increase in the diagnosis of bipolar disorder among American children and teenagers just between 1994 and 2003. In other words, for every 1 kid diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1994, 40 kids were diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2003, and most of the new diagnoses were for American children under age 15. Prior to the early 1990s, pediatric bipolar disorder was rarely diagnosed in the United States or anywhere else. Before 1994, most experts agreed that bipolar disorder was characterized by episodes of depression alternating with episodes of mania. A person experiencing a manic episode is typically euphoric and energetic, often going without sleep. Episodes of mania can last for days or weeks. Episodes of depression can last for weeks or months. Beginning in the mid-1990s, a group of researchers led by Dr. Joseph Biederman at Harvard Medical School published a series of papers claiming that bipolar disorder in children is different. In children, Biederman and his colleagues argued, bipolar disorder isn't episodic at all. It is rapid cycling, with the phases lasting minutes instead of weeks or months. And Biederman argued further that mania in a childhood doesn't look like mania in adults. Manic children are not energetic and euphoric, according to Biederman and his Harvard colleagues. Instead, they are irritable. The children Biederman was describing are so different from adults with bipolar disorder that one might reasonably question whether Biederman was describing any kind of bipolar disorder at all. But Biederman insisted that this was indeed bipolar disorder and that it should be treated with the same powerful antipsychotic drugs such as Risperdal and Seroquel, which are often used for bipolar disorder in adults. There were and are skeptics. One of them, psychotherapist Dominic Riccio, believes that Biederman and his colleagues are making a diagnosis of bipolar because a child has mood switches. If a child goes from happy to sad and has impulsive outbursts, it's characterized as bipolar. But children have mood swings. To characterize this as a mental illness is a serious flaw. Psychiatrist Jennifer Harris was during her fellowship in adolescent psychiatry in 2002 when Dr. Biederman was prompting the diagnosis of pediatric bipolar disorder. We saw a huge number of kids coming in with that diagnosis, she said, but a lot of them turned out not to have it when you did a thorough assessment. Harris concluded, many clinicians find it easier to tell parents that their child has a brain-based disorder than to suggest changes in their parenting. Back in a minute. Thank you. That's the situation I was in with Trent and his mom. Trent was having mood swings. When his parents didn't buy him the toy he wanted, he would scream in the store. But his parents had never taught him the rules of good behavior. His behavior was pretty much what you would expect of a kid who has never known consistent discipline. Trent's mom had read a Newsweek cover story about pediatric bipolar disorder. The article featured Dr. Biederman and his Harvard colleagues and repeated Biederman's assertion that doctors are failing to diagnose bipolar disorder in children. I could understand mom's frustration. I, Leonard Sachs, am just a local family physician. Who am I to dispute Newsweek magazine and Dr. Biederman, the nationally renowned Harvard child psychiatrist? Trent's mom wanted me to tell her that Trent had a chemical imbalance that could be fixed by Risperdal or Seroquel, the drugs championed by Dr. Biederman. I told Mom that Trent didn't need those medications. Trent needed parents who had the confidence and authority to teach Fulgham's rules. Mom left the office in a huff. Less than 3 weeks after that, Mom stormed out of my office. Dr. Biederman and his two colleagues at Harvard admitted to receiving more than $4 million from Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Risperdal, AstraZeneca, the manufacturer of Seroquel, and other drug companies. The payments were discovered in the course of an investigation launched by U.S. Senator Charles Grassley and conducted by the staff of the Senate Judiciary Committee. To be clear, Biederman and his colleagues broke no law. There's no law prohibiting doctors from accepting millions of dollars from drug companies. But Dr. Biederman's action was unethical, in my judgment. I think Dr. Biederman should have told Newsweek and everyone else that he was, in essence, acting as a paid spokesperson for the drug companies. But he kept the money a secret, or at least it seems as though he tried to. Psychiatric social worker Elizabeth Root observes that parents are satisfied with the quick fix that medications offer. Parents then don't want to do the hard work of getting to the bottom of the problem. Child psychiatrist Elizabeth Roberts goes even further. Psychiatrists are now misdiagnosing and over-medicating children for ordinary defiance and misbehavior. The temper tantrums of belligerent children are increasingly being characterized as psychiatric illnesses. Using such diagnoses as bipolar disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and Asperger's, doctors are justifying the sedation of difficult kids with powerful psychiatric drugs that may have serious, permanent, or even lethal side effects. Back in a minute. Thank you. Kids need authority in their lives. Families need authority in order to function. But when parents abdicate their authority, a vacuum results. Nature abhors a vacuum. The doctor, armed with a prescription pad, steps in or is sucked in. Medication fills the role of governing the child's behavior, a role that the parents ought to have filled. For many American parents, it is now easier to administer a pill prescribed by a board-certified physician than to firmly instruct a child and impose consequences for bad behavior. That's a shame, and that, in my view, is a major factor driving the explosion in the prescribing of these medications in the United States. This phenomenon is peculiar to North America. German researchers found that during roughly the same period in which the diagnosis of bipolar disorder was exploding for children in the United States, the proportion of children diagnosed with bipolar disorder in Germany actually decreased. In Spain, likewise, the rate of diagnosis of pediatric bipolar disorder did not change for boys and decreased for girls. The Germans observed dryly, there is no compelling reason to presume that the frequency of bipolar disorder in children and adolescents is actually much higher in the U.S. than in Europe. Therefore, there's considerable European skepticism about the high prevalence rate of bipolar disorder in children in the U.S. The diagnosis of bipolar disorder in youngsters is fairly rare outside the United States. In Germany, a diagnosis of bipolar disorder in childhood is still extremely rare. Researchers recently compared diagnoses for children in the United States and England using comprehensive national databases for both countries. They found that after adjusting for overall population, for every one child in England discharged with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, 73 children in the United States were discharged with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And that is the end of part 1 of chapter 3, Why Are So Many of Our Children on Medication? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, chapter 16 of the book, Tales from My Bicentennial Year by Mike Buell. And it's about a family living in Gansevoort, New York, which is in the Adirondacks, and told from the perspective of the 10-year-old son. So, and this is chapter 16, The Turkey Bowl, in which the kids, the Third Streeters and the Fourth Streeters, are getting together to play a big Thanksgiving Day football game. Thanksgiving Day had finally arrived. Of course, Mike C. and I had to go to church early and help set up for Mass. I never understood why we had Mass on Thanksgiving. It was not like way back when God created Thanksgiving Day. It certainly isn't any kind of holy day. I think it was Abraham Lincoln or FDR who finally proclaimed it a national holiday. My mother even has a story that a lady named Sarah Buell came up with the idea of a national holiday way back during the Civil War as a way of giving thanks. Heck, we all know it was the Pilgrims, but how that turned into a Holy Mass Day, I'm not sure. Either way, Mike C. and I had to be there at 9 o'clock for the 10 o'clock Mass. For Father H., this was one of his big Masses. He had 3 large Masses each year that he loved because the house was packed. And I'm sure the collections were up as well. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter were the biggies. For these shows, he did a big production. We had a full chorus, 3 altar boys. Tyrone was the lead, and then Mike C. and me, 2 readers, and Father H. picked a family to bring up the gifts. Mike C. and I were basically stagehands for this big production. Lighting the candles, getting the lighting right, making sure all the music books were in the pews. We made it through the Mass. And all I was thinking was playing the Third Streeters in the Turkey Bowl. We got home from Mass in time to catch the last hour or so of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. We all enjoyed watching the parade together. It has always been my dream to see it in person. We all sat in front of the TV. In those days, a TV was an actual piece of furniture. They were housed in real wood with wood drawers and big knobs. Heck, it stood as tall as a cabinet. Eating our Freehofers donuts from the Gansevoort Market, we watched all the floats and the big balloons while we waited for Santa to come and finish up the parade. My grandmother and her sister, Henrietta, arrived right after parade for dinner. My dad liked to have the dinner early so he could watch the football games. I loved the smell of Thanksgiving, that turkey smell wafting across the room. My grandmother drove a green Volkswagen Beetle with a small orange ball on the antenna so she could find her car in a parking lot. It was always a little weird because the trunk isn't where the engine should be. Anyway, she opened the front hood and sitting there was all her food to carry up. I give Grandma credit. She was a little ahead of her time. When everyone else was driving big giant cars, not at all worried about gas prices, she was driving a Beetle. She also carried around a small thermos of water. Now everyone buys water in a bottle. It was unheard of then. Thanksgiving dinner was quite uneventful. It was nice. We said grace. We passed the food. We ate. We were done. The Buells were not a family that sat around and talked over and after dinner. We ate and were on to our next thing. This, for my dad, was to watch football. For me, it was to go out and play football. My dad was all mad because the Cowboys usually played on Thanksgiving Day, but for some reason the Cardinals were playing the Buffalo Bills instead. I quickly asked to be excused and started rushing out the door until I was stopped to go change out of my church clothes. I was not going to ruin my good shirt playing football. Back in a minute. Thank you. I changed. There we go. I changed and ran over to Mike C.'s. I charged up the stairs and was banging on his door. Nana, Mike C.'s grandmother, came to the door. Mike's family was Italian, and it was a completely different scene at his house. She pulled me into the house, squeezed my cheeks, shouted something in Italian to the rest of the house, and pointed me over to a chair. They were all talking over each other, gesturing and passing food around. Nothing like the quiet atmosphere at my house. The food they were eating was different too. They were passing lasagna right along with the turkey. Who ever heard of that? They quickly fixed me a plate of food, even though I said I just ate. Mangia, Nana was saying to me, moving her hands like she was eating. So I quickly wolfed down the food. Mike C. finally got away from the table, and we started out to play. We went down and got Huge Gene and Brad, and then we saw Russ finally come out. Russ had his football with him. He had a brand new Wilson football. Real leather, he would say. We ran to my yard, the football field, and started to throw the ball around waiting for the third streeters. Finally, they started showing up, and they were there to win. TJ Belly Button Picker had a big smile on his little pockmarked face. The third streeters lined up with Bobby Donlin at quarterback, Chris Fartwell as his wide receiver, Big June Donlin, yes, his older sister, she was tougher than he was, as the center. TJ Belly Button Picker was what we called the floater. The floater could be whatever you needed, an extra wide receiver, a running back, or a blocker. For the real ringer in the gang, they brought a new kid, Winston Fritz, as the running back. We had seen Winston around at bus stop and school, but never played against him. His family had just moved on to 3rd Street a month or so ago. He was huge. We thought Huge Gene was a big boy. Winston made Gene look like a baby. To us, they might as well have brought in Ed Too Tall Jones from the Dallas Cowboys. The sight of Winston immediately drew complaints from us. This was supposed to be 3rd Street versus 4th Street, not 4th Street versus whoever. They didn't want to hear it. Shut up and play or go home losers, was Bobby's reply. He had a point. Cry about it and go home, or have some fun and play. We chose to play, but under protest, whatever that meant. We lined up with me at quarterback, Huge Gene as the wide receiver, and covering Chris Fartwell on defense, and Mike C. as the center going up against Big June. Big Russ was going to be our running back going up against Winston. That left Brad as our floater up against TJ. After we determined who was playing what position and insulting each other back and forth, we needed to decide who was going to kick off and who would receive. We decided to have a longest throw contest. The quarterbacks would throw the ball down the field, and whoever threw it the longest would win. The winning team got to pick whether to kick off or receive. We threw it from the goal line. I figured to be nice, mostly to see what I had to beat, I'd let Bobby go first. Bobby ran a few steps up to the goal line and heaved it. It was not a bad throw. It hit probably midfield or so, bounced, and rolled another 20 feet or so. So I figured this would be easy. I ran a few steps up to the line and chucked it. Brad was standing right where Bobby's ball hit the ground, and my ball sailed over his head, hit the ground, bounced once, and stopped. We won. We all fought. Bobby started saying that while my ball went further than his in the air, his rolled further than mine did, and we never said in the air. We said the furthest ball. Nothing was easy. The argument continued until Winston spoke up for the first time. 4th Street won the toss. Let's play. And that was that. Bobby backed right down. We said that we would receive the ball first and went down by my house to wait for the kickoff. The 3rd Streeters wanted us to call them the Steelers, which was fine with us. We hated them and the Steelers. We would be the Cowboys. I'm sure the hatred was mutual. Our plan was that whoever got the ball was to lateral it to Huge Gene, and everyone else would form a running wall of steel in front of him, letting no one through. Every time we played the Steelers up until now, Bobby would kick off. It would go to Gene, and Gene would run it back to about midfield before being clobbered. I should probably let you know that we played a mean game of tackle football. There were no pads or anything, but for some reason we all had helmets, which in hindsight was probably more dangerous than if we just played without the helmets. Winston, mind you, did not have a helmet. We asked him if he wanted to take ours off too. He just shook his head no and said, "Nope, that's okay, you might need them." Okay. This time Winston kicked the ball off. The ball went sailing over our heads like a rocket ship, hit my house on the bottom bricks, and bounced back towards us. Brad, who was pretty fast, found the ball first. He looked up and saw Winston heading his way looking like a charging buffalo. Brad threw the ball backwards to bug-eyed Mike C. Mike C. saw Winston now headed towards him, looking like a bull. Mike C. threw it back to Big Russ. Russ saw Winston now looking like a mad bull. Russ threw the ball back to Winston, who of course was on the other team. Winston, with the ball, still looked like a mad bull to me. I had him in my sights and was getting close to scoring. I ran right at him, lowered my helmet and shoulder, and stretched my arms around him to bring him down. Down I did come. Winston hit me like a snowplow hits an old man. On my way back down to earth, I was able to see Winston score the first touchdown. In street football, the loser walks to the other end of the field for the kickoff. As we marched back, the screaming match ensued. Huge Gene at Brad, Brad at Mike C., Big Russ at me at Big Russ, and on and on. It was decided this time all we really needed to do was catch the ball and fall to the ground. That way Winston couldn't hurt us. We could not fumble, they could not score. We could probably score by throwing the ball to Huge Gene, who we felt was probably a little faster than Winston. So our plan was to throw the ball deep to Gene and watch him run it into the end zone. Winston kicked the ball. Again, it flew like a rocket ship, but this time it went up higher and came down to Huge Gene. Gene started to run, but then looked up and saw Winston charging and then saw all of us telling him to drop to the ground, which thankfully he did. Bobby, seeing Gene drop to the ground, let his verbal rage fly against us. It was amazing to hear the profanity-laced mouth of a supposed 10-year-old. The word chicken came out a few times as well. He was hopping mad. After suffering game after game of physical abuse from us, he wanted his revenge today. He was determined not to let us off the hook that easy by falling to the ground. We lined up for the next play, which for us was really a test play. Would Winston rush the quarterback, or would he cover Huge Gene? We wanted him to cover Gene because we needed Gene to outrun him. Winston, however, chose to rush the quarterback, which luckily, for me, I was the quarterback. In our other football games, we had talked the Steelers into doing away with the 5 Mississippi count before rushing to tackle a quarterback. At that time, we had a big advantage in size. Now, with Winston on their team, we were regretting that move. Back in a minute. Thank you. Mike C. was supposed to hike the ball on my count of hut 3. As I said, hut 1, I looked up and viewed Winston. Winston appeared to me as if in slow motion, pointed at me and smiled. As I said, hut 2, Winston's smile turned into a snarl with his teeth showing and growling like a dog. As I said, hut 3, I saw Winston roll over Mike C. and Big Russ like a steamroller. As I stood there with my deer-in-the-headlights look, waiting to be hit, I heard Huge Gene yell at me, "You stupid ass, don't just stand there, throw it to me, I'm wide open." Too late. Winston ran over me like a lawnmower, spinning me around and throwing me across the yard. On the next play, we did manage to smarten up a bit. I backed way up from Mike C., like Roger Staubach in the famed Shotgun. As soon as Mike C. hiked it to me, I got it and immediately threw the long pass to Huge Gene. Winston did not have enough time to get me. He still had plenty of time to knock around Big Russ and Mike C., who at this point had lost all fun and excitement in this game. Gene jumped up and caught the ball, and like Staubach to Golden Richards, we had a touchdown. Game tied. The game pretty much went like this all day, back and forth. Towards the end of the game, they definitely had the momentum. The game was still tied. Winston was slowing down, not really trying when we had the ball. But when they got the ball, watch out. It was like he was the bowling ball and we were the pins. The Steelers were beating us up. Correction. Winston was beating us up. In fact, it might as well have been just us against Winston. The other Steelers were no help. They were very effective cheerleaders for Winston. I started asking Bobby if he brought his pom-poms and skirt to cheer Winston on. Big Russ at this point had enough of being beaten up by Winston. Keep in mind, Winston was not and did not play dirty. He was just big and tough. No kicking or biting or anything. Russ, however, was used to being the big man on our campus. Not that he was a bully or anything. He was just used to not being messed with. He was the biggest. Winston was not only a threat for this football team, but in Russ's mind, he was a threat to the entire balance of power between the streets. The way Russ saw it, it was time he reestablished himself as the big man. We had just scored a touchdown to tie it up again. Mike C. kicked it off for us, and of course the ball went right to Winston. Winston charged down the field with the ball. He threw me aside, ran over huge Gene, stepped on Brad, bulldozed Mike C., and then there was Russ. Russ had had enough. He stood straight up, knees bent and fists raised, with Winston coming right at him. We all jumped up and ran down to them for what was coming. All the Third Streeters caught up to Winston and Russ. Chants of fight, fight, fight starting up. Winston stopped in front of Russ. He placed the ball on the ground, got into his fight stance, and said in a very low and in a moderate tone to Russ, "I don't want to fight you. I just want to play football. You sure you want to do this? If so, take your best shot. If not, let's forget it and go back to playing." Big Russ cocked his right fist back and swung with all his might at Winston. Winston saw this coming, dropped his head low while still standing with his fists up. Russ's fist came circling around with such a force as it flew over Winston's head, missing it just by a hair. But it went straight into Mike C.'s eye. Mike C., having just been punched, had to punch the offender back. He squared off at Russ and threw his punch. His punch missed Russ and hit Bobby Donlin. The riot ensued. Punches flying, bodies tackling each other. Big June caught me with a punch to the face. Everyone was fighting except Winston. He was just standing there watching everybody and shaking his head. Winston finally got so upset with us that he started pulling everyone off each other and shoved us to one side or the other. Once he separated us, he got real mad and said, "You guys have no idea what fighting is or why you're even fighting. Just play the game and have fun. Why do you need to do this? I'm going home to eat pie. See y'all later." And with that, the turkey bowl ended. The score was 56-56. And if you ask me, it was 9 dumbasses versus 1 smart guy. And that was chapter 16 of the book, My Bicentennial Year, Tales from My Bicentennial Year, and that was chapter 16, The Turkey Bowl. And next time we will be reading chapter 17, The Gansevoort Mansion. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. Hashtag bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.